Wednesday here on the Locked On NFL podcast. The Combine is underway. Who are we looking at the most? Find out here on the Wednesday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Chris Carter, James Rapien, coming at you. Let's get into
it. You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We're your hosts, Chris Carter and James Rapien, here on this episode. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday through Friday episodes of the Locked On NFL podcast with all the different hosts every single day, your team every day on all the different teams in the NFL. But as always, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now, full disclosure, we are actually recording this on Sunday. So if anything crazy has happened, if Patrick Mahomes has been traded to the Cincinnati Bengals, James Rapien, we don't know because we did this on Sunday. But we wanted to get this to you in a Combine preview because both of us are going to be at the Combine and hard at work. So with that being said, James, let's talk about some of the top guys that we're going to be looking at the Combine, especially when it comes to these events and the people that have maybe the most to gain with their performance. James, is there any position group that you think is going to be the most exciting to watch in the events this week?
Well, position group most exciting. I was going to start with quarterbacks, but you say most exciting, and it's going to sound weird, but I think it's the offensive lineman.
Really?
Because this offensive tackle class is deep.
It is really
and
deep.
If you're listening to this, your team is considering an offensive lineman with their first round pick. They are.
Is.
Even the Bears drafting first overall. Guess what? They're considering one because they have another first round pick. So, So every team in this draft is going to consider an offensive lineman. And a lot of these guys, the Tyler Guytons of the world, the Marius Mimses of the world, guys that have question marks, could show the NFL teams that they deserve to be a top 8 pick. Like Marius Mims could go in the top 8 in April. Not 28, 8. And what he does this week, that impacts it. So it's not the most interesting position group for me most years. It's certainly not the one I love the most. I love the wide receivers. I love watching running backs and corners and in the fun positions at tight ends. But to me, the offensive tackles, a lot of these guys could go early and it could really impact the draft. And of course, quarterbacks are in there as well, but offensive tackles for sure are on my radar.
Well, let's go back to the point that you brought up, though. Quarterbacks. It's going to be a very interesting path to the draft for these guys. Caleb Williams has been like the first overall pick guaranteed guy for a couple of years now. Everyone's been talking about him. But Drake May, I think, still has a lot to prove. Jaden Daniels can move up if he does well. We saw what Anthony Richardson's combine did for him. I'm not saying that he'll do what Anthony Richardson did, but we've seen how combines can impact quarterback status in there. But there's also guys like Michael Penix, Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, guys that this can be a week where they can set a really good tone for the rest of the offseason and maybe prove that they also should be among the first round quarterbacks. Who are you watching the closest at the Combine to see if they can prove that?
Well, I think Bo Nix is really intriguing because it feels like he's 35 years old because of his days at Auburn, and he goes to Oregon and puts up big numbers. And now you look at him, and is he a first rounder? Is he not? Is Michael Penix, who was right there in the Heisman voting, is he going to be a first rounder? I think those two guys have a lot to prove and could show that and start to cement their status as first round quarterbacks this week. But you mentioned the top. And my question is a pretty simple one. Are we sure it's going to be Caleb Williams? And are we sure it's going to be Drake May? Because that's been the 1-2. But I think Jaden Daniels is in there. And it's weird because I'm not sure if Jaden Daniels could overtake Caleb Williams at 1. But I certainly think he could overtake Drake May at 2. But I can also – but I also think that Drake May could overtake Caleb Williams at 1.
Now that's the hot take, sir.
I could see if that makes sense. Like I don't necessarily expect the Bears to be in on Jaden Daniels to bring him into Soldier Field, but I could totally see them falling in love with Drake May's physical attributes and what he does, and him going 1, and then Washington would probably then go Caleb Williams 2. It also wouldn't shock me if Caleb Williams goes 1, if Jaden Daniels overtakes May for number 2. It just stylistically, I think taking Daniels 1, older prospect, you have Caleb Williams, you have Drake May. I think it's hard for that to happen, hard for him to make that leap. Not that it shouldn't happen, because I think he's really talented. But it would surprise me if those aren't the first 3 picks in the draft. And I know there are different mocks, or Marvin Harrison's going and all the. I would surprise me if it isn't quarterback to start this year's draft.
It would certainly, I think, be very interesting to see that happen, and quarterbacks flying off that fast in a year. And then when quarterbacks fly off that fast, that also changes the market for the rest of the quarterbacks, because then you are looking at JJ. Like JJ McCarthy was a guy all season long. I'm like, oh, this guy's not going to go high. And now he's being talked about as like a first round pick. And, even though in Michigan's system, what did you see him have to do too much? They ran the football over everybody, and he made some plays. I'm not saying he didn't. I'm not saying that he didn't have a good college career or anything like that. But like, he doesn't have Joe Burrow's tape. He doesn't have Josh Allen's tape. He doesn't have the guys. He doesn't have Caleb Williams or Drake May's tape. I saw Drake May live. That guy's insane. I saw him I saw him switch to his left hand and throw a touchdown pass while being hit, and then throwing it past the coverage. That's how good that guy is. And like, I don't
physical
see that
freak.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like, that kind of stuff is ridiculous. I don't see that in JJ McCarthy or Nix or Penix. And I like all 3 of those guys bring things to the table that you can like. But I just don't think – I think that if you take one of those guys in the first round, you are reaching and making a really big gamble that is the right pick. That is the right reach in that situation. It's just my opinion. I think Bo Nix, like the Steelers, what they're going through with Kenny Pickett, I think if you draft Bo Nix, you risk going through a very similar thing. Penix, the injury history scares just everything out of me. I'm like, I'm sorry. I have a hard time touching that until maybe the 3rd round.
Yeah.
JJ McCarthy's the biggest wild card in this. Like, I just don't know enough about JJ McCarthy's from his tape to say, oh yeah, 1st round pick, 2nd round pick, whatever. I don't see that, but we know teams like to take big swings at quarterback.
Yeah. And I think McCarthy is interesting. It's funny you mentioned him. I think he would be a perfect fit in Pittsburgh. I like him. I do. And I do think he's the 4th quarterback.
I don't dislike him. I just don't know. That's what I'm saying,
Yeah. I think he just didn't need to do a ton for Michigan, as weird as it sounds. I think he's really athletic, can run, can really move.
He can move.
And that's something you don't see as much from him. He doesn't have the biggest stature in the world, right? He's not going to wow you with his size, but I do think he's got enough arm strength. If he was there at 20, for example, I think the Steelers would take him. And I think that Atlanta is the spot. As of right now, if I had to guess, I think Atlanta is a team that could certainly take him at 8 overall. But there are a lot of teams that should still be in on quarterback and be open to it, because who knows, maybe those top 3 do not go 1 through 3 like I think of. But let's keep it rolling here. Let's talk about some of these other prospects. We haven't talked about wide receiver. Wide receiver is my favorite position. So we will do that and much, much more coming up next.
But first, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. There's always great chances to win on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. If you're like me, football season being done doesn't mean I'm done with sports. FanDuel gives you so many ways to play with NBA, NHL, college basketball, and so much more action that's happening every single day. You never run out of options. FanDuel has so many ways for you to win all season long with any season that you love. You can make quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive prop bets, and so many more ways to find your favorite bets to get up in the dollars. New customers, you join today and you get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. This episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get things off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life, like a professional therapist. So today, I'm going to let something off my chest. And one of those things is everybody thinks they know who's going to run what's going to run a certain 40-yard dash before the combine happens. Stop playing. You ain't watched that guy. You don't got no laser tape when you watch these people on tape. You weren't at the games with no laser tape. These guys are going to run their speeds. Let's enjoy it and watch them what they actually do. Stop trying to predict like you know what's going to happen in the combine, Mr. Random Fan on Twitter that always tweets at me that they know who's the fastest in the NFL combine. But you know where I can get help with that? With a good therapist from BetterHelp Therapy Online. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
Chris, let's dive into the wide receiver position because I mentioned Marvin Harrison Jr. And it's interesting, and they'll probably wait till their pro day to do a lot of the activities. And heck, by the time you hear this, it might be the case. But are we sure Marvin Harrison Jr. is the top wide receiver?
Yes. I'm stopping you. I'm stopping you.
Are we?
Marv is that guy. He's that guy.
That guy had it's not about like Malik Nabers. Pittsburgh hasn't had a receiver like Malik Nabers since Antonio Brown went to Oakland, to be clear.
Very true.
Malik Nabers, dude.
Oh, no, he's a dude. So is Marvin Harrison.
He is. I'll put it out there. I'll just say it. Will not shock me one bit if Nabers is the top wide receiver in this draft class 5 years from now. Will not shock me one bit. He's right there. He's third. To me, he's third.
Okay.
But he's right there. Nabers, he's got like, you know how cars used to have anti-lock or anti-lock brakes was like a thing. Like, you're not this brake, you got anti-lock brakes. He's got some kind of weird brake system that just not many people possess on planet Earth. No car. You're driving that Nissan in Pittsburgh. You know, we drive Nissans here a Locked On. None of them have, and they have great brake systems. Malik Nabers' brake system is on another level. And so his stop-start ability to run a bunch of different routes and discuss, I think he could be right there. I really do. And I'm not hating on Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm in Ohio. No. I'm in Ohio. If you could get him, you get him. But man, Malik Nabers to me is like 1AA. This isn't like Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle, where I thought there was a sizable gap between the two. To me, this would be
1A, 1B?
AJ Green and Julio Jones in 2011.
That's a good comparison. So let me ask you this. Put on your GM hat. You're at the top of the draft. You don't need a quarterback, but you do need a wide receiver. Are you taking Nabers over Marvin?
It's really close. It's so basically, if I'm Arizona, right?
Yeah.
And you stand pat at 4, what are you doing? And as of now, I still probably take Harrison, but it is so close. Like if I'm the Chargers, I couldn't care less because I'll just take the other one.
Give me.
And who knows? Maybe they take Joe Alt or someone else. But when it comes specifically to wide receiver, I think it's that close to me where I wouldn't be bummed about the other one falling. And I wouldn't be worried about trading up, which is saying something because Marvin Harrison Jr. has been talked about for as long as Caleb Williams, if not longer, as the top wide receiver. And I think Malik Nabers is right there.
Yeah, I agree that he's right. He's going to go top 10. Like, I'm really intrigued to see how close. I still think whoever takes the first shot at wide receiver will take Marvin Harrison Jr. The genes, the 6'4", and with his speed, like that guy's like I think that he has all the prototypes. I agree about Nabers. His route running ability, his ability to change directions and stop on a dime, that's going to make him extremely powerful, extremely dangerous in the NFL. And to your point, I think there is a chance that he could, that in 5 years, when these guys are signing their next year, their next contracts, that there is a chance he's the better receiver compared to Marvin Harrison. I just think that with the way the NFL picks guys, they're going to look at everything Marvin Harrison Jr. brings to the table and take him first. But let's move down the list a little bit. Let's start looking at.
Do you need the 6'4" guy? By the way,
I don't think you need it. No, not in today's NFL.
In this day and age. Yeah,
no. If you have the right system, you don't need him.
Yeah, like Nabers can make contested catches. I watched it. He plays strong as hell. So what? And I'm not saying you. I just in general, like that's our kick. Oh, the big 6'4". Give me 6'1" and playing above the rim. I'm fine with that.
I agree. I'm very much on your side on that contest, but I know that there are some NFL GMs that just salivate over stuff like that, and I'm just like, okay, exactly. Let's move down the list at wide receiver here, and we're gonna skip even like Odunze, Brian Thomas Jr. Let's start looking at guys like Adonai Mitchell, Keon Coleman, Roman Wilson, those guys. Who of that next class that like probably goes maybe second roundish intrigues you the most of those wide receivers?
Is Troy Franklin allowed, or is he too high?
I think he's too high. I think he's definitely, in my book, he should definitely go first round. That's why I left him out of that.
Okay. I'm just making sure as we look at this. A guy I really like, and you didn't mention him, Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky. Get to know him.
See, I love him. I just, everyone that I see when they talk about receivers, they talk about him as a third round guy. Second round Corley, that would be I love his ability. I loved him in the Senior Bowl week. I loved his tape. I think for the Steelers, he'd be a great fit this year if they could get him in the third round. But you think he's going second?
Book it. Second.
Ooh, okay,
second round. Because you talk about size. He's got the size. Mm-hmm. He's going to weigh in at like 210, 215.
Yeah.
218. And he's going to run well. Mm-hmm. And he's 5'11". So he's just going to be shredded, really tough to bring down, really good after the catch. I think he comes in right away and makes an impact in the league. And people are going to look up and say, well, why in the world was this guy drafted ahead of Malachi Corley? Part of it's the Western Kentucky element too. I think he's someone that will be second round that I would take over some of the guys you mentioned. I would take him over Keon Coleman. And I really wouldn't think about it hard. I just because Corley, I would have ahead of him. So there's one for you to chew on a little bit. I like Roman Wilson. I actually think he's a third round guy.
Okay. I like Roman Wilson too. He's also like, frankly, I covered Keon Coleman in the ACC, good player and all that. I would take both Corley and Wilson over Coleman because of their ability. Both of them are shifty. They will be tough. They will be able to get open in the NFL in different ways that I think Coleman can. Like, I think Keon Coleman, he's 6'4", like Harrison, but he doesn't possess all the traits that Harrison does. And I think that he can be more of the stereotypical 6'4" guy that definitely goes up and gets it and has the size, but maybe he's nowhere near as complete as Harrison is. Whereas if I had a choice between the more complete receiver that's like 4 inches shorter, I will take that guy. Yep.
Yeah. One more receiver to give you. Javon Baker out of UCF. Seen him yet?
I really like Baker. Yeah.
Watch him, because that dude, how he runs this week, I think he plays pretty fast. We'll see how he runs, but that could be. He's a guy that a lot of people are picking in round 4 and 5 in these mock draft simulators.
I don't think he's gonna. I think after the combine, he's gonna be like at least third, maybe second.
Yeah, he could be one of those risers where you're looking and he's picked 60 on draft night. That's just where he goes on that Friday night.
Yeah,
and I think he's one of those guys that small school, kind of like Malachi Corley, that could go much higher than people anticipate right now. And I would be, put it like this, I'd be stunned if Corley doesn't go in the top 64.
Okay. So, I wouldn't be stunned. I'd be stunned. I wouldn't be stunned if he did go in the top 64. I'm kind of indifferent there, because I feel like early on when I was looking at names and I hadn't looked at them at all, I was like, okay. And then I saw a little bit of Senior Bowl. I was like, okay. And then I looked more. I watched him more and more. I was like, okay, no. This guy's good. It just depends on how much people buy into his build and his work there. I wouldn't be shocked to see him in the second round or the third round, to be frank. But I don't know. I just don't know how he stacks up against other positions out there, because the thing about this, and we'll get to this more in the next segment, there are so many deep positions this year. Wide receivers really deep, corners really deep, tackles really deep. I think linebacker has a depth at, they don't have any top first round picks, but there's a lot of guys that you could take there at several good spots there. I think that there's a good range of talented guys. We talked about all the quarterback picks that are there. I think there's a lot of really good safety options. Again, no first rounders, but a lot of guys that can go on day 2 or day 3 or early day 3 that could be really, really good fits in the NFL. let's get to some more of those positions. I want to talk to you about corner, James, because that's always another big position, and this is a really deep class this year. We'll get to that on the next segment of the Locked On NFL podcast.
Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Spark plugs for your Honda Civic. That's what I did with eBay Motors recently. So whatever you're looking for, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive today at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
We're back here on the Wednesday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Chris Carter, James Rapien, still talking NFL Combine preview. Let's switch it over to the opponents of the wide receivers, the cornerbacks, which is always huge to talk around draft time. And it's because these are like the two most pure athletic things to judge. You see their 40 times that matter, their jumps matter, their broad jumps, their long jumps, their high jumps, whatever. Their shuttles are very important. Whereas no one's watching for an offensive lineman's 40-yard dash nearly as much, but these are two positions that are there, and these are two positions that are really deep this year. Guys that could go in the first round. Nate Wiggins out of Clemson, Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo, Cooper DeJean out of Iowa, Terrion Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry both out of Alabama, and it's Rakestraw Jr. out of Missouri, Kamari Lassiter out of Georgia. All those guys are in that mix this year to be in that first round conversation. James, for your money, who this year do you think wows the most at the combine to make themselves the first cornerback off the board?
Ooh, that's a good one. First corner off the board. Now that makes it tougher now. Let me think about that, because I think there's some contenders here. And I think if I had to guess today, Terrion Arnold.
We're on the same page.
Yep, would be the top guy. But to me, Nate Wiggins is in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
I think Quinion Mitchell certainly in the mix. And then maybe Kool-Aid McKinstry can get into it, but that's probably it. To me, Mitchell, coming from Toledo, had a really good Senior Bowl week and needs to continue to show that he is that dude. Coming from Toledo, it's tough. It's tough to do. But could he do it? Absolutely, I think he could, and I think he's on his way to doing that and being one of the top corners. I think Nate Wiggins versus Arnold is sort of a coin flip at this point, and Wiggins could certainly take over that spot, that top spot. But that's where I'm at. I think Cooper DeJean is going to go lower than people expect. I think Ennis Rakestraw Jr. is, could still go round one. I'm not saying that, but it'll be 15 to 32, not necessarily top 14. And I think Arnold, Wiggins, and even Quinion Mitchell have a chance to go in the top half of the first round if they check every box they're hoping to check this week.
I agree. Mitchell especially, and again, I was joking with the Better Help, read about, predicting 40-yard dashes, but I see a lot of people say he could run 4.3 speed and not 4.38 speed. They're saying 4.3 speed with how fast he runs. If he does hit a speed like that, that change, a lot of people are going to turn and be like, oh, because he has really good coverage tape, and he can really hit on the afterburners, catch up to a ball in the air, really attack the ball. I think Quinion Mitchell can certainly bring that. Nate Wiggins, a guy at 6'2", 185, he has the length that you want to be the prototypical cornerback one to work against taller wide receivers, but also have the athleticism to stick with him. Now, Nate Wiggins' top end speed, that might be the thing that holds him back a little bit because he's projected to be a little bit higher. But I think that this is where you also choose what kind of a corner do you want. Do you want the corners that get out of the box the fastest, like the 10-yard split is faster than the 40-yard dash? Do you want the corner that's more explosive in the jump for height, or the vertical jump, or do you want more with the broad jump in the events? You want more with the shuttle to show their ability to change directions and hit their top speeds? That's all interesting metrics to determine what you want out of that for the combine. but it's also combining it with the tape and the coverage numbers. Like Kool-Aid McKinstry is a guy, like you said, 6'1", 195, 200 poundage. If he hits a 4.3-ish type time, that could put him back in the conversation for the top corners, because he was a guy that coming into this past year was looked at like that, and then like he let up some big plays. So people were like, okay, still first round, but not top 15, maybe like, top 25 in that range. He's a guy that can certainly make a difference there. But there's also plenty of guys past that first round group. Like, Kamari Lassiter's very fringe. I think that he could sneak into the first round, but I think he's more likely to be in the second round. But there's also guys who have been getting more and more notice, like Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon. He's one of my favorites. I love him. 6'3", 195, great build. But Mike Sanders still out of Michigan's another big name there. Even further down, Max Melton out of Rutgers. There's some really good athletes at corner. Is there a sleeper at corner that you think that people aren't talking enough as a high pick, who might on during the combine week might change some people's tunes?
You said Sanders-Stroh, right?
I like him a lot.
Yeah, I like him. I think he's going to come in and be a starting nickel day one if you want him to. I really like him. Outside of that, I think it's interesting because we could look at these guys like Chow Smith-Wade out of Washington State, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. out of Louisville, I think is someone people have mentioned. Some of these guys are going to separate themselves and emerge and become, because you know how draft season works, is risers, it gets parroted. Yeah. And the risers really rise really quickly. And I think some of these guys are in position, TJ Tampa, to move up from where they're currently at. And it'll be interesting. But I do think that you're on something there with Sanders-Stroh. And I would be pretty surprised if he doesn't end up in the AFC North. Just feels like an AFC North.
He does feel like an AFC.
Doesn't he?
He's physical, he's gritty, he can stick with guys. And he's a good cover man. Like he's not like Mike Hilton. Bengal and Steve. Love Mike Hilton. But Mike Hilton.
Sending Mike this clip. Watch. All right.
But Mike Hilton's not the guy that you want covering the fastest man all the way down the field, like on a 50-yard bomb. Mike Hilton's the guy you want floating between all the guys that's going to catch you off guard. He's going to blitz you, but he can also drop back into coverage. He can also be feisty and stick with a guy that's 6'4". I've seen I remember Mike Hilton sticking Travis Kelce in games, and I'm like, how does he do that? And that's just who Mike Hilton's always been, even in Steelers training camp. But I think that if Mike Sanders still, if he's like a Mike Hilton with better deep coverage skills, absolutely you're going after a guy like that, because nickels, like decent nickel cornerbacks go for, you can find those guys without investing too much in the NFL, because you can get those guys in free agency without paying too much. But great nickels, guys that can be very versatile in your coverage packages, those guys are worth quite a bit if you can move them between outside and inside, maybe a little bit of safety. And if Sanders still is of that nature, and he's one of the better ones of that nature in this draft class, that can change a lot about what people are looking for. But some people say Cooper DeJean could be the guy that's the most versatile of this draft class. And that's why I'm not sure where I put Cooper DeJean here, James, because some people say he's just a safety. Like some people aren't even counting him as a cornerback because of just what they expect of him. But if he runs a solid 40-yard dash, if he runs a good shuttle, I could see people be like, nah, put him at outside corner and watch him cook. Yeah,
I'll be honest. Anytime this topic comes up, I just think about the draft and the matchups. You know what I'm talking about. The race draft that was had. And I'm like, man, white team needs a corner. He's got to play corner. He's got to play corner. So we'll see.
You already have Harrison Smith. What do you mean?
Safety. Safety.
Oh my gosh,
Cooper DeJean linebacker. Like he can't.
Shout out to the greatest Dave Chappelle show skit of all time. By the way,
Jason Sehorn is not entering. He's not walking through that door.
He's not walking through that door.
I think it's interesting. I do think he'll play corner at the next level, but I don't know where he'll go.
Right.
And that's you want to talk about someone that has the most to prove? I think he's certainly someone that has the most to prove.
Yeah. I agree. I'm really intrigued to see where Cooper DeJean falls in this corner class, just like we're talking about all these different positions. Again, we only covered a few. We looked a little bit at offensive line, quarter, corner, wide receiver. There's so many other positions. We'll keep you covered with all of those here on the Locked On NFL podcast all week long. He's James Rapien. I'm Chris Carter. Thank you so much for tuning into the Wednesday edition. Check out tomorrow for another edition of the Locked On NFL podcast on your favorite podcasting apps or on YouTube.